Small businesses are entering a new reality. AI has moved from concept to competitive edge, redefining speed, accuracy, and customer expectations. We have with us Steph Wells, who leads SMB Sales at Salesforce, who has been helping customers through all the technological revolution for over a decade across thousands of clients in APAC.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, as you say, I am Stephanie Wells. I lead our small business team across Australia and New Zealand. I've been at Salesforce for just over 15 years. I took a hiatus at another company called Sprout Social, but have recently come back. And I'm happy to talk about all things AI and SMB because this is truly my passion. And it's what I do day in and day out. So really excited to be here.
Very excited to have you. I'm sure you'll be able to share a lot of insights that is so practical even for our own business. I also have with me, of course, my business partner who would be talking about it from the lens of a small business like ourselves instead of like enterprise customers who we are serving every day. Welcome, Robin.
Hi, guys. Great to be here.
Well, let's get into it. Steph, you work with a segment that feels every economic volatility and pressure. It gets dramatic every year, but they are also the best companies to adopt the tool fast. What is the single most significant shift that AI has created in small businesses from your perspective?
Let's just start by saying, this is a very exciting time for businesses of all sizes, right? I mean, you can't go anywhere without having a conversation about AI. And just in the past few years, we've seen AI evolve, right? It's been predictive, then it's been generative, and now it's kind of moving to this whole autonomous agent category. And that's exciting, right? That we've seen such innovation in such a short period of time. It also allows SMBs to scale faster than they ever have before. And so those are exciting conversations to be a part of. But I think that evolution to go from generative to autonomous agent, that's the material shift that we're seeing some really cool stories come out of. And we're really seeing some value being driven within some of these small organizations.
And I can't wait to hear practical applications of businesses that have become unicorn because of it. Robin, from your perspective, what is the shift?
Yeah, well, I think bigger organizations are usually tied down by legacy technology. And I think small business has a massive opportunity to leapfrog because they've got all of these tools. It's easy to use. The Salesforce licensing model is also going towards consumption-based. So it's more about what you use rather than buying, the number of seats in your business. So that's an evolution that I think small businesses will take advantage of because they inherently don't have as much data as the bigger players, but they get access to the same tech that the bigger players get and can just turn it on. So it's very exciting. It's
no longer about manpower, which is the SMBs don't really have. Is it safe to say it's about machine power, automating power? So, are you seeing that SMBs are adopting AI?
Oh, definitely. In terms of every single founder, every executive in small business that I speak to, every one of them is no longer just an idea or a concept. It's actually becoming and coming to fruition. We have plenty of customers who have moved into this autonomous agent era and are starting to see revenue increases because of it. Wow. And that's really powerful stuff because that's really what's going to make others, maybe the people who haven't necessarily adopted, go in and start to experiment and try these autonomous agents to see what sort of value they can derive from them.
One of the things that people often ask me when I talk about this, they are so hungry for information about AI and what it can do. But they always ask, what are the specific use cases?
100%. My whole thing is whenever we talk to executives, no one buys AI. Right? Who's out there being I'll take 5 of the AI things, So I think it is about use cases and the practicality and the way that people are using these things is basically the essence of really where businesses are going to derive value. I mean, the advice we always say is it's great. And sometimes it's fun to ideate where you could put an autonomous agent, but sometimes that's not going to necessarily derive the biggest value for your organization. Yeah. And so the advice we always say is let's sort of ideate or map out the places that have the most data or the most high volume or the most strenuous admin tasks, because that's where autonomous agents can kind of deliver really fast value and making sure that, again, the business side sort of sees the power of where they can put these agents. And then you can ideate and expand and customize. But the areas that we see are either in service or pre-sales, an area where historically has been an area for high admin, high volume, and sometimes really hard for businesses to keep up with, particularly around high demand that they're seeing from their customers.
What about you, Robin? What are the different use cases that you've seen for small businesses?
I think it's well known that there's a maturity curve for agentic use cases for businesses, like having a chatbot service, customer service requirements, things like that. Those things are very expected, and those are things you should tackle early on in the life cycle. But there's really cool use cases we're seeing. If you apply a creative lens to the technology, then you can come up with some really cool things. So an idea that we have been playing with is having a game through WhatsApp using an agent that is playing the game with the customer, because now you've got a lot more flexibility in what an agent can do. Before, you would have had to hard code the entire game. Now it's like you give them a task and an objective, and they have intention, and they can follow a high level script to play the game. So I think that's the thing that I really love, is if you get through those basic use cases, they all are the same project, and then start thinking, what else can we do with this? And that's where it gets really exciting.
Totally. And I think there is definitely like some circumstances where we've seen small businesses start to ideate around these things, and perhaps where the real power in the unlock comes from areas that they don't necessarily have the skills or expertise. One of them being like the ability to code, or custom code things within even Salesforce. And essentially with that, like, companies now can take an idea and turn it into reality within seconds.
Wow.
And I think that was particularly in SMBs, where perhaps there has been a skill gap or perhaps a lag to get that skill in their business. Now it's readily available and accessible. Yeah. And that is truly the power, I think, behind some of these agents.
Yeah. These are really more on the creative thinking already, right? But for the benefit of a lot of SMB leaders who are still thinking, what is the best use case for AI for me? Let's demystify it for them. So you mentioned earlier service and pre-sales. Yeah. Like, are you able to break that down? Does that mean that they have additional agents to answer some of those, service inquiries rather than a chatbot? What is the distinction?
Yeah, it goes beyond a chatbot. Okay. I think chatbot is definitely something that maybe some SMBs have toyed with in the past, but it perhaps required a lot more involvement and or triaging with a human. Yeah. I think what's the power and the unlock with an autonomous agent is that it's able to access both structured and unstructured data and can go deep and to actually resolve some of these inquiries. We have a few examples in our SMB market. Kudosity is actually deflecting, I think, 40% of their support inquiries with the autonomous agent without any touch point from human interaction. Now, this doesn't mean that we're diminishing, the support team, because now think about what that unlocks for them to actually do. Because if an autonomous agent can run throughout those inquiries that are coming in and take off and offload that volume, what could those customer reps be doing with their time? Exactly. And often it's like building relationships or giving them a wowed experience, right? And to the customers that not only need it, but deserve it, that are your loyal customer base. And that again is just really incredible, that when we are deploying these agents, you're actually seeing tangible value, but then there's an intrinsic value that actually comes because you're letting your employees do their best work and the work that they enjoy.
40% is huge. And over what period is that?
It's since they deployed it.
Less than a year. Less than a year. Yeah, that's phenomenal. Yeah. And we saw the same thing with Eljana. Rob, can you share more about Eljana?
Yeah, so Eljana had about 50% deflection on their inbound cases where an agent just fully handled it. And we don't know if that would have become a case, but it was certainly an inquiry and a question that they were able to answer. They actually saw on WhatsApp, using the same agent, they had an 85% deflection rate. So that was really incredible. And they haven't really promoted that as a channel, but now it's doing something like 20% of all of their interactions through WhatsApp. And it's just, you find it on Google My Business. That's the only place you can find it. So it's incredible.
And this is really based on customer behavior, right? Yeah. That's why you're seeing an 85% jump, because it's so easy for people to just message you on WhatsApp. It's like messaging your friends, right? Yeah. Both of these examples are amazing. Can you please break down for our audience and SMB business leaders, how did they start?
How do they start? I think people are in different varying, maturity in terms of AI, right? Yes. We talk a little bit about this idea and evolution from predictive to generative to autonomous agents. You don't necessarily have to start with just, trying an experiment with predictive. We've seen customers jump in, feet first into the autonomous agent world. It does require, people to think differently and sort of to jump in with their 2 feet. But I think what we're seeing is people are naturally curious about how these things operate and how they have to help them grow and expand with, and they know how truly valuable that taking this advantage early can only generate, more revenue for their organization or better outcomes. And I think that's a lot of entrepreneurs are always thinking that, like, how can I do more with less? Or how can I get my company to grow faster? And these are the opportunities that are presenting themselves.
You said something really important there, that is thinking differently, because this is something that is far beyond what has been done. So, and even with a fast deployment, being experimental to have some cushion for some mistakes. That's like thinking differently, because we've often been very conservative with our approach and very methodical as business leaders. Would you say it's the same for Eljana? Did they jump in feet first?
They did. They were very pragmatic about it. Yeah, but not all customers are like that. We're working with another airline that, quite rightly so, they're very afraid of what the agent could do, because they get inquiries around baggage restrictions by country, visa restrictions. And so they can be held liable if there's anything bad. But we just took a different tact with the client and we said, look, let's just do an internal agent in your CRM that your customer service reps can work with. And it does things like summarize all the cases related to this customer or summarize their flight history. And it will look into all of their CRM records, which can be difficult to review, and summarize it for them. And that's a simple use case that there's no customer risk of doing it in the front end, I think we forget sometimes the simplest use cases are really powerful.
Oh, for sure. But you also bring up like a new skill that's sort of being added to the repertoire of when you do deploy an agent. You now need to think about managing the agent, right? And I think this was like something that was an epiphany actually when I applied for the job. One of the recruiters had asked me a question of like, what's your opinion on how you would manage agents and humans alongside one another? And it was a pivotal moment in my career because one, I'd never been asked that. Two, I didn't necessarily have the experience to generate a thoughtful answer, but it did show me that we are in this era, whether we want to or not, like it's happening around us. And there is many, use cases, and we're hearing it from SMBs all the way to enterprise that are leveraging these autonomous agents. Now, a skill set that's required as a leader is to manage both those two alongside one another. And I think one of the things that kind of stood out to me when talking to leaders who have deployed it is they're like, you cannot forget about the human loop. You have to bring people along the journey, because I think our first reaction to launching agents has always been like, will it take my job? And I think that the guidance that we have seen that worked really well is when you bring people in and not only just tell them about how it's going to help them do the things they don't want to do anymore, the sort of maybe mundane tasks that are part of their job, or, the admin heavy work. And then it allows them to do the things they really like. When people start to see that that's actually reality and not just lip service, the power is actually unlocked, because then they start to ideate and they start to see the power. And when we think about this, like this is actually a skill set as a leader that you need to have, but it's then managing that journey of transformation and change, allowing everyone to jump feet first into this new agentic era. But I think it's a really powerful way to think about it. But I also think that the way that you want to manage this across your teams is there is a lot of tools now that also help you manage these agents. Will summarize, will give you input in terms of where things maybe have went wrong, or perhaps maybe make suggestions. Is it getting the right data set? All these things that you can then help to navigate and only better the outcome.
Absolutely. There's actually, in startups, there's a well-known period of a startup's life cycle called the dead zone, and it's between 12 and 50 employees. It's the period when you've got 12 employees, you can manage everyone by yourself because you're instructing them in the business. When you get past 12, you need middle management, and they need procedures and documents written down. It's the same with AI. We have to take the same approach of going to 50, but we don't need to go to 50. We can keep the 12, but now we've got agents to do the work of the 50. But you've still got to write it down. Like, you've still got to have a process for your employees and for your agents. And that's, I think, a big learning for organizations is they don't have their institutional knowledge anywhere documented. It's like that is the prerequisite to do AI really well.
Data is what fuels AI, right?
Exactly.
And I think that that's been one of the lessons that we've heard from our customers when deploying AI is, you need to have your data intact. product or at least a good data strategy. I think everyone gets really excited and sometimes just jumps, like, as we say, 2 feet in, but we do need to think about that data layer. Because as you say, we need to educate the agent itself to do its job. And sometimes without that context, it is going to hallucinate. It is not going to get to the outcome you want. And so the same way you would onboard an employee is how you onboard an agent.
Correct. Except the agent will continue working forever and it works 24/7.
That's true.
That's the thing. We're happy to spend 6 weeks training a human, but it's like, okay, we've got an AI agent. What if we spent 12 weeks training that to be really good?
Can we break it down? Like we talk about, I think AI has really created the awareness and the urgency for business leaders to finally listen and, look at their data and see it as an asset, right? When we talk about a data strategy, what does that mean for deploying agents? How does that look like?
Perhaps like exactly what you just maybe said too, is thinking about where all your data is stored. It doesn't always have to be in the same place.
Yes.
I mean, ideally it'd be all in Salesforce maybe, but that could be a biased answer. I don't know. But we do realize that sometimes data does sit elsewhere and contextual data sits elsewhere. And so a data strategy, I think, is one, even just having an idea of where that data sits, understanding how it's going to integrate and how it's going to, or how the agent's going to access it. And I think the other thing to think about is the security element, right? Because we know that data, particularly in this day of age, especially if it's sensitive, needs to be protected and needs to be minded in a way that it does keep it private and safe. And so I think that's a data strategy, is thinking about the security and the access, but then also how an agent or even your employees are accessing that data to get, from all the way from inception or finding your prospect to closing the deal and getting customers for life. So I think within that journey, there's so much data points, and it is a holistic strategy to make sure that it's being stored and kept and being able to be accessed by the right people at the right time.
Honestly, it's been made so easy now with Data Cloud. Like, can you imagine life before Data Cloud?
I can remember.
I remember how painful it is.
Sure. And the integration points that you would have to have across those many
when
different
I think
things.
about it, it's like, oh my gosh, it sounds so difficult. But now it's like, I mean, this sounds like a plug,
but it is transformational, because in CRM, we used to think about a contact as being a single customer view, and we would force everything into the contact. But what if they have 2 email addresses? How do we manage unsubscribe? So it became this nightmare of people customizing their CRM data model to allow for their business requirement. Now with Data Cloud, it doesn't matter if I have 3 contacts with different contexts, I can roll that up into one human and then talk to them in the relevant way. So it's changed how we think about deduplication in CRM. It's made that less important. It's still important because you don't want duplicate data. But yeah, it's a whole new world, Data Cloud.
I mean, CRM tends to be structured data, right? But what about all the contextual data that is unstructured, that sits and revolves around your customer? I think that is the true unlock. And that if you give your agent that power of data, I mean, that is where you're going to get the best outcome.
Exactly. And I think Data Cloud is great for customer related data, but for other data, like your electronics data and all of that kind of stuff, usually you'd have that in a data warehouse, and you'd have a BI platform that looks at the data warehouse. Data Cloud has a 0 copy, so we can pull in anything relevant, but we can also give it back all of the Salesforce ecosystem data. So your BI platform is like running off full 360 view of the business. So it actually enables both sides. The non-Salesforce side is enabled by Salesforce. Yeah.
So in that regard, can you please give 3 advice or 3 steps to all the small business leaders? Start with you, Robin.
I would just focus on getting the processes written down, like getting your knowledge articles ready, because that's what is going to be required. And you need a CRM platform that's going to support AI use cases. So starting with Salesforce is great because it's an ecosystem. You can add on features. I need service, I need marketing. They're just additional modules that you buy, all in the same data model. So it's a very simple technology strategy that can get you ready for acquisition.
Yeah, I'll jump on that. I think there's like a lot of do's and don'ts that I've seen across our customer base. I think definitely don't try to DIY your AI. Even if you might be a good DIY person at home, I recommend not doing it for AI. And the only reason is because it can lead to security risks or hallucinations, right? And I think when we want to think about outcomes and value, it truly does come down to this idea of a really trusted platform or trusted data. The other piece that I brought up earlier was like, don't forget the human element, I think, in all of this. Like every single customer that I've talked to that has deployed Agentforce, everyone has a story about the change management within their own organization around the employees, the current employees. And ironically, like you'd think you might hear some horror stories. In fact, you hear the opposite. People jumping on board, getting on the tools and on the keyboard to help only perpetuate and sort of advance where their AI is going within their organization. And then finally, I would just say, just definitely prioritize the trusted data layer, because I think that's crucial to the success of the autonomous agent, not only to do its task, but then future-proofing it to make sure that it's doing the right things in the right time.
But would you say do it now? Do it today. Don't delay.
Yes,
absolutely.
You don't want to be left behind, right? And I think this is such an opportunity for a lot of SMBs to grow faster. And I think that is, I don't meet any, leader that has said, oh, I really want to slow business down. Everybody wants to go faster and they want it to do it yesterday. And I think this is everyone's opportunity to do just that. It's not lip service. It is doing and driving real results in organizations.
Well, we've heard 40%, 50% from 2 companies, both in, the SMB industry segment.
So actually, we see at Salesforce, 88% of SMBs who are leveraging agents are actually seeing an increase in revenue as well.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's really powerful stuff. People are using it and actually seeing results from it.
88%. Let's just sit on that for a moment. I don't know why you'd wait, right? It sounds like we're selling like a car here. Call now. But honestly, my mind is blown. Like, where do you hear that? Where do you hear these type of stats? So the question that I have for you, Steph, before I let you go is, we've sat in rooms where we're the minority. Do you think AI will close the gap for women?
I definitely do. I think if I think about just even my own career, I kind of started at Salesforce when cloud computing was kicking off, right? And we saw a lot of organizations who had a lot of on-premise tech who were a little bit fearful of cloud computing, right? And what it could mean for their businesses in terms of cost savings and less investment or upfront investment. And those who jumped on board, like, really did see some tangible results. I think the same is true now here in AI. And because I was able to get on that bandwagon early, and it did great wonders for my career. It put me in rooms and boardrooms and gave me access to a broader network that propelled my career forward. I think the same is true for the AI world and the AI evolution. This is why I say everyone should be jumping in 2 feet first, particularly women, because this is an opportunity.
Absolutely.
When I think about even doing some research on what skills might be needed in the future as AI advances, the stats show that like empathy, relationship building, EQ are all really important skill sets. And these are natural skill sets that women possess.
Yes.
And so it's not something that I have to like go and, skill up on. It's something that I already have. And so it's tapping into those strengths and almost encouraging other women to, jump 2 feet in. This AI evolution is not going away. It's only going to propel people's careers forward. If it excites you and if it interests you, I would say go for it. Start experimenting today, because I think it definitely will put you in boardrooms and situations that will only advance your career and hopefully close the gap. And I think, particularly with AI and LLMs, we want women's voices to be inputting to these tools so that hopefully then it does create a more equalized world across the way that AI might influence both our future generations as well as current.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Your presence here is really important, in encouraging not just business leaders, but hopefully women and professionals and business leaders at the same time. So thank you for your time. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.